Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am extremely thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the idea of, with your work and your life, having the purpose of a servant's heart. Because we know if you use the servant's heart mentality or attitude, you'll truly make a difference. How big that is, we don't really care. But wouldn't you like to make a difference every day? I know I would. I know my guests would. Because wait till you hear her. She's making a big difference. Probably weekly, if not every day. We also developed this show to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you to make an impact in your world. So as you listen to this awesome guest today, there might be some things she says that you can share with somebody in your network or your world to make an impact. And most importantly, I want you to think about today is how you're going to serve yourself and others today and what impact you'll create today. Keyword, I do that cloud circle is today. I have people tell me, oh, I waited a week, or I didn't do it for 4 days, or I waited 6 months. I heard what you said. So listen to this awesome guest and just serve today. It could be as simple as going out and tell somebody you look great today, or calling your best friend, or whatever it may be. Remember, serving doesn't have to be big and momentous. It could be just a little thing that you impacted somebody's life. I want to thank my great sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Imagine being part of an exclusive community of high-income, successful business owners and entrepreneurs from very diverse industries. Together, they're building a thought leader platform to impact and change the world. So if you're interested in this community, just reach out to me and I'll get you all the information. With that being said, I've got an absolute rock star in something. Today is October 7th. I'm time-stamping it because our election's coming up, and sustainable energy itself is a big topic in the election. We're not going to get political. We're going to get logical. That was pretty good. Now I think about that. We're going to talk about the importance of the sustainability of that. Tough word for me, but how it can affect your lives and how you can make a difference. I want to welcome to our show, Vanessa. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with sustainable energy. What does that mean to you, and what should the audience know about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just kind of want to start off with how you started off the conversation with starting off with kind of servant leadership and how oftentimes that can make us more effective leaders. And that has been through my ideology as a sustainability expert as well, too. So I'll just give some background. I came from Silicon Valley. That's where I grew up. And if you know anything about it, this is a very entrepreneurial place. It's a very innovative place. We're always looking for a new way of doing things. And I've worked at countless startups. I went to Berkeley, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. And something that I really noticed looking at all of these sustainable ventures that I thought was so interesting is that they were oftentimes much more innovative than their counterparts. I saw sustainable organizations being able to develop IP faster, retain talent better, and go to market quicker. And I really was so curious as to what is it about sustainable thinking that really enables us to be able to be much more innovative. And that's, we can kind of get into, but a book publisher reached out to me and asked me to write a book on innovation, which enabled me to write 60 different case studies for the book on successful organizations, particularly in renewables and clean tech. What is it about these organizations that are inherently more innovative? So this is an incredibly innovative industry when we're talking about renewables, when we're thinking about clean tech. They've been able to develop IP at a faster rate than pretty much any other industry. So they're incredibly fast-paced, incredibly innovative, but I think it's something that all organizations can learn from. This is not something just unique to one sector, and that's really kind of what the book is about and what we can get into.
Yeah, and it's coming out 2025. You mentioned before the show, so keep an eye. What's the name of the book?
It's called The Innovation Game.
The Innovation Game. So keep an eye out for it. You'll probably very soon you're going to have a pre-order of the book.
Yes.
They can go out. And where can they get that?
They can already sign up to get
Oh, great.
updates about the book on the Sustainability Experts website. It's the-sustainability-experts.com if you want to look into it.
There's a personal question, but I think the audience is thinking this too.
Mhm.
I don't have a big corporate company where I can make an impact in sustainable energy. So how can the audience or me really make an impact ourselves with sustainable energy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I would give the same advice to an individual as I would a corporation, actually, in this regard.
Okay.
So, thinking about a company in terms of their core competencies or an individual in terms of their core competencies is exactly where we would start with this. So, there are incredible doctors and nurses that are involved with renewable energy projects at hospitals because, for example, at hospitals, you have to have, you know, energy that is up all the time, 24/7. You cannot have a lag in your energy for a hospital for all of this equipment that's life-saving equipment. So there's a huge push of all of these incredible doctors to actually get specifically storage for renewable energy at hospitals. That's a really, really big push. Obviously, other incredible professions like lawyers, even, people who are working within churches or in other
Mhm.
religious institutions, there's huge groups towards, helping the environment. So really thinking about what do you feel are your strongest assets as a person, whether it's, potentially professionally, whether you can organize people and really be a community builder. What are the key things that you feel make you strong as an individual or as an organization? And how can that be aligned with sustainable goals?
Yeah. The other thing I think about, and that's so well said, I appreciate that because it's much easier than I thought. Great answer. I'm always, we think, hey, the big corporate guy in the sky, I can't do that, but we can. Of course,
Yeah.
smaller level, but still we can make inroads.
Mhm.
Talk about legacy, because what I'm hearing too, the more
Mm.
Steve Ramona is 63, I'll be around 30, 40 year, whatever. But for those 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds that are around, I want to leave a legacy of energy that's going to be useful to them. Is that
Yeah.
an important thing?
Yeah, I think legacy is an incredibly important thing. And I think when we're thinking about implementing sustainable missions, this is no longer, really something that's just true for a particular sector or for a particular type of individual. I mean, I've been in here at New York for Climate Week, and you have almost every Fortune 500 company somehow involved with Climate Week in some way, shape, or form. I mean, this is not just the legacy of a particular individual, but it's the legacy of an economy now. And we're seeing that more and more. And at least for this past week at Climate Week, I've never seen so much momentum, so much excitement, and also so many updates about where we are in terms of the implementation stage for a lot of these things. And I think a lot of, the initial kind of founders of this movement definitely were thinking about legacy. They were thinking of those 7 generations out. That's kind of the original, thought around this movement. But I think more and more as we see these younger generations take on sustainability, it's less about legacy and it's more about urgency. It's a huge portion of Gen Z when we're talking about people below the age of 25. It's something like 20 to 30% are considering not having kids because of climate change. That's a
Mm.
major life choice based on something that seems fairly abstract. But this is really, really hurting the younger generation. There's actually something called climate-based anxiety, which is actually a diagnosable level of anxiety from climate change and because of the threats of climate change, and the death toll that's continuing to go up. The death toll currently stands at 5 million from climate change, and it continues to increase. So, I think that, the founders were thinking about legacy, but the younger generations are thinking about today.
Yeah, we're both in Silicon Valley. Talk about climate change with our temperatures this week and
Yeah.
last week and going to be this week. It's crazy. And just on a side note, for an Energy game yesterday in Santa Clara, where you live, that the highest temperature ever reached on an October football game, which is something's changing because that's a huge
Yeah.
record. I think it blew it by a couple, 2 or 3 degrees. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely happened. Whether you agree or not, just look up in the sky. You could or feel the
Mhm.
temperature and see that it's happening.
Yeah.
You have a very impressive background. I loved
Thank
going through
you.
your background. One of those, you work with the UN Foundation. What did you
Mhm.
learn there to help you get you where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I worked specifically within a startup in the UN Foundation called Data 2X. And actually, specifically, that
Hmm.
was more on the social side of things because they were responsible for developing the 80 cents to a man's dollar statistic for gender equity and inclusion. Um, and so they are really the research institution behind a lot of these statistics that move the needle for a lot of legal and policy cases. And so, really looking at women's inclusion, but inclusion in general in the financial sector. How do we make that happen? How do we implement that? So, working cross sector between the private sector and the public sector to really make that happen. And I think the UN as an institution is really fantastic at bridging between multiple sectors and between multiple institutions. I think that that is really their role I see in the economy. And I think that in terms of the rapid innovation that we see with climate technologies, that's something that really happens in corporate. But I think that in terms of bringing people together, being the bridge, I think the UN Foundation is fantastic at that.
Man, I never thought about them bridging multiple industries, and that's exactly true. You think
Mhm.
of all the movies and stuff that you hear about the UN, and but
Yeah,
I didn't think about the corporate side because hey, they're not going away. Corporations are
yeah.
here to stay. How they handle everything, I think that's the key. With sustainability, everything that you know, what do you think the future of sustainable energy is going to be?
Well, it's going to be a part of every sector and a part of every organization. So this is an incredibly massive undertaking, and the speed at which we have to go at this is pretty remarkable. But it ends up being a really actually necessary push when you think about it from a business perspective. A lot of businesses are worried about innovation and about how competitive markets are becoming today. Fortune 500 companies do not stay on that list for as long as they used to. It was
Mm,
about 64 years in the 1950s, and today it's about 14 years. Saying goes, it's roughly every 2 weeks where one of those companies gets bumped off the list. So this is an incredibly competitive environment, and innovation is what helps you stay on that list. So
yeah.
innovation is something that's incredibly important. And renewable energy and sustainability actually can be a framework for you to innovate in your organization. So it might actually be the push you need for that. So when I consult with organizations, I ask them, two questions. Can we think about all the sustainability inputs in your business? Do they either reduce cost or do they improve the quality of your product? And it's about aligning that. And that's the only way it can truly be profitable. That's the only way we can scale. That's the only way we can harness market forces to really launch this. And it ends up being really useful for a lot of organizations. So I'll give you one incredible example that I think really kind of takes this ideology into practice. And they're called Barry Callebaut. They're a chocolate company. They're a chocolate supplier. They produce one in every 5 bites of chocolate, and they
Wow.
supply to kind of some of the more well-known brands. You think of, M&M, Hershey's. Those are probably the ones that are top of mind. But all of these organizations are the suppliers to them. And they decided chocolate industry, if you know, it's a very dirty business, not just from a sustainability perspective, but also from a social perspective, which a lot of the farmers live below the poverty line. They wanted to
Wow.
change this. They wanted to completely rethink this. And one of the things they did is they went back to the farmers and they actually spent time with the farmers, listening to the farmers. And the farmers are incredibly knowledgeable about the plant. I mean, if you want a source of innovation, you go to the source itself. You go to your supplier, you try to collaborate with them, and they are incredibly knowledgeable about this. And what they learned is that the cacao is not just the seed that makes chocolate. There's a whole fruit around it. It's a delicious fruit. It's a wonderful fruit. You can make liqueurs from it. You can make juices from it. You can make all these different products from it. And that's what the local people were actually doing. And so from that learning of all those incredible farmers in West Africa, the executive said, we're going to launch a whole new line of products. Everything from cosmetics to pharmaceuticals to new culinary products. So this really ended up being the source of innovation that they needed. And not only is this sustainable because now they're not wasting 70% of the cacao, which was the fruit, and that rotting and creating methane emissions, they're turning it into a product which not only increases their revenue, but diversifies their revenue into potentially different industries. And also, they're able to connect with existing customers, which are all these chefs who wanted to have new innovative ingredients in their cooking, and they're able to connect with them. So I think that there's, a lot to learn from this. I think one of the things I learned from that as a case study is that I coined this as waste to value. This is one of the principles that I coin in my book, where it's really about how can we look through all our waste products? Is there a potential product in those waste products? And this is where we see the alignment between sustainability and innovation, and actually being sustainability that pushes organizations to innovate at the rate they need to in this competitive environment.
Well, the elephant in the room is their ROI. Unfortunately, every corporation has to make money because they've got, like we all do, have expenses. That is a genius move. So
Mm-hmm.
you're taking waste, you've turned
Mm-hmm.
into a product, which turns into profit. And now the chefs have a unique meal to give out, because marketing
Yeah,
is all about a restaurant. If I could
absolutely.
say, I've got this lasagna with this unique chocolate fruit, probably the wrong thing, but I think the audience
Yeah.
should get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the golden nugget for a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many great examples that prove that principle. So there's 7 principles in the book about how sustainability can help you innovate. But this one principle of waste to value is really interesting. There's a lot of successful companies that have done it. I'll give one more example, which is Interface. Interface has voted to be one of the most sustainable organizations in the US and among the world. And they actually started out being one of the most polluting businesses in the world, which I think it's interesting to see that pivot. Because when we're thinking about servant leadership, when we're thinking about innovating with sustainability, all these organizations, most of the time, they have a dirty aspect to their business. They need to pivot. They might have the right intention, they might have the right heart, but it's really about how can we implement this in a way that makes sense for business. Interface transitioned from being one of the most dirty manufacturing businesses to one of the most sustainable. And the way that they did it was they actually produce commercial carpeting. This is a very traditional manufacturing business. This is not an innovative Silicon Valley tech startup,
Wow.
right? So the fact that they transitioned so well, I think, is a really interesting case study, particularly. And they said, well, all of our carpets, they're made out of plastic, and then they have this toxic glue that glues that plastic down to the floor. The entirety of our product is not sustainable. And at the time, this was in the 1990s, at the time, you could recycle polyester fabric, which is made out of plastic. It was scientifically possible, but not from a corporate perspective or not from a business perspective. It didn't make sense. And they actually worked with fishermen. And all of these thrown away nets that just get thrown away in the ocean after being used, and they keep catching fish and killing fish and things like that, they just get wasted. And they looked at the material of this and they realized this was the exact type of polyester that they could actually recycle and use in their carpeting. So a lot of their carpeting today is based on old fishing nets that have just been left in the ocean. So cleaning up the ocean and producing this beautiful product. And actually, what's interesting about it, there's something called virgin polyester, which is originally made from petroleum, and then the recycled form. The recycled form of it is actually much stronger. So the quality of the product actually improved. And I think this is another interesting example of waste to value. You're taking the waste product, it can either be in your own industry or from another person's or another industry, and thinking about how can you create a product from it. And that gives really multiple sources of value. It's not just improving your own product, but you're also reducing an externality that has value in and of itself, which creates a lot of loyalty amongst not only your employees, customers, and stakeholders, but also from that other industry. So you can create incredible cross-industry partnerships that way as well.
Podcast host shouldn't be speechless, but I am. Because this is the cream de la cream for business
Mm-hmm.
101. How
Yeah.
can you build a better widget and
Mm-hmm.
collaborations never thought of? This
Yeah.
carpet opportunity, I mean, who would have thunk? But they have to be willing to spend some money to do this, because it's not like it didn't pop up. They had to spend money, research, look at
Absolutely.
different products. But right now, today, them spending the money probably made double or triple the money from that,
Oh,
and the sustainability, right?
absolutely. And I think what's interesting about Interface is they actually survived a few recessions and their competition didn't. And their competition was using their old way of business. So it's mainly these new technologies that they invested in. They invested in the innovation that helped them survive the recession, when their competition didn't. So innovation is really not an option for business. You have to continue to innovate. There's no other option. You have to continue to disrupt. So I know that, a lot of, investors will say, oh, well, we have to invest more in that innovation, but it's really not an option. You have to think about that for your business survival. I know there's a lot of great metrics to measure innovation. One of them is, one product that only offers 10% of your total revenue, you need to increase to 50% by a certain timeline. So really thinking about, you need to continue to replace your products with new products or incredibly, enhanced versions of those products in order to survive in this incredibly competitive market. Sustainability is a great way to do that because it provides a framework for actually disrupting your own business and being able to compete in the current market.
And the marketing aspect that is off the charts. I mean, this carpet company Interface could say, hey, we're using reusable fishnets to make our carpet so we're not affecting the environment.
Yeah.
Marketing powerhouse with that. Because I don't know if people say whether you believe climate change or not, we all want to help the environment. We know that the earth is changing and all that great stuff. This is so powerful. We're coming to the end here, and this is too bad because there's more. And I think I want to have you come back because there's more we can dive into. Let's dive into the podcast because it's an awesome thing. People can learn more about this stuff on your podcast. Talk about the mission and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Sustainability Experts, it's a consulting practice, a speaking practice, as well as a podcast. And we have a wonderful podcast. We've had incredible guests come on. We've had Olympian Venus Williams, who, in addition to being an Olympian, also runs 3 environmental businesses on the side and has been wildly successful with that. So she talked about her operational experience with that, specifically looking in the fashion industry, and actually making more effective athleisure because she was using recycled plastic in her clothing that was able to withstand, better conditions for athletes. So that was kind of our first podcast that we had come on. We've had other incredible people like Raj Shah. He's president of the Rockefeller Foundation. He's done incredible work. He formerly worked under U.S. President Obama in USAID, and he was one of the reasons that stopped the Ebola crisis. He was in charge of that. He's one of the reasons why we have not faced the worst when it comes to Ebola. So he really talked about how do you operationalize and look at data for a lot of these cause-related work. We had, former CEO Eric Schoenberg, who was the former CEO of the parent company to Fast Company and Inc. So we have a really variety of guests that come on, but it's all about how do you operationalize and what makes sense for business, and how can we innovate in this current era of doing that, because it's not really a matter of if, but it's a matter of how. So that's what the consulting practice and the speaking practice, we come in, we do workshops with businesses on how can we disrupt, how can we innovate. But then, the podcast is a great way for people to tune in and to learn from incredible business leaders in each episode.
And a servant's heart, audience, you probably get sick of me saying, you probably don't. That's what a servant's heart does. She's using the podcast to educate you. So if you're a small, medium-sized business, I know some of you out there are founders or CEOs, it's a great place to see how you can innovate your sustainable energy, like the stories you said, and figure out ways. And that's what you do. You'll walk this company through this to see what's out there, what they're missing. As they say, the old phrase, money you're left on the table, which you talk about this carpet company. They're like, we left a lot of money on the table, and a lot of environmental currency as well by finding this. So it's powerful what you do. Man, I want to thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
I've learned so much in a short time. We'll bring you back in a couple months. So look for her. She's a rock star, as you can tell. I'm speaking to the choir when I say that. Let's end with a fun question. I always like to end with a really fun
great.
question. So you've got a reservation at a restaurant. We're local. We're both in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
So figure, when your favorite restaurants, you have to name it. You have a table of 4. You're going to sit in one chair. In the other 3 chairs, who would you invite, dead or alive? And what food would you order?
That's really interesting. Well, kind of keeping on theme, I would probably invite, 3 of the biggest, oil company CEOs probably to my table, because I think it's really interesting to work with people who, originally kind of environmentalists wouldn't collaborate with, but actually collaborate them and work with them. I was talking to someone who's an executive at an oil company the other day, and he was saying, what can I really do to help my business survive in this new era. I don't like, tell me what the solution is. People keep yelling at me, but I don't know what to do here. And I said, there's incredible research into biofuels, into geothermal. We went into a whole conversation, but he was like, no one has ever really told me the solution. So I think collaborating with people that you otherwise wouldn't collaborate with is a great way to go about it. And we'd probably order something vegetarian because that's a lower carbon footprint.
Amen. Like, see, so I've asked this over 100 times. That's one of the best answers
Oh,
because it ties
thank
to
you.
well, and it ties to your passion. And none of the other answers
Yeah.
were wrong, but I love this is your passion. If you can
Mhm.
meet 3 oil tycoons, we call
Mhm.
them that. I'm old, so we call them that, but it doesn't matter. And it can make change with them, like you're doing with this gentleman.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're doing great stuff. So,
Thank you.
man, I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just like to add, if anyone wants to listen to the podcast, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on all of the major platforms under the Sustainability Experts. Also, we do most of our updates on LinkedIn, so if you want to follow us on that, that's probably the best way to listen to our work. And of course, there's our website, which is the-sustainability-experts.com.
I was just going to ask you, how can people connect with you and
Oh,
support you? And you read my
great.
mind. Audience, incredible guests, because when they can read the host's mind, especially my crazy mind, she's done good. So that's good. Thank you again, Vanessa. Like I said, we're
Thank
going
you
to
so
bring you
much.
back. And audience, real quick, love for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. One, it's not for the reasons you think. It's you can go back to Vanessa's show and listen to it. There's a lot of tips here, a lot of ideas. If you have a business or a friend that has a business, you can go back to and find it easier. But here's the other thing. You have a family or a friend that's like, hey, I need my business to be more sustainable with energy. Boom, have them listen to this and connect with Vanessa. So use it as a tool for us to network and collaborate together. It's a great way. They can listen to her and listen to her passion, and I'm sure they're going to be very interested. The other thing is comment on the YouTube channel. I love that call to action. You might have a comment for Vanessa or a critique for the podcast. Me and Vanessa wanted to do the show for you. It's not about us. And she totally agrees. And that's why I love her. That's what it's about. Educate, motivate, inspire. And if we could do something better to do that, I love the critique. And as always, me and Vanessa want to thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And we'll see you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.